no squeaking. That's awesome. All right, I feel like I'm really crooked here. All right, maybe that's better. Maybe it's worse. Okay, this is a week where we can recap a couple of Marvel movies because Iron Man 3 comes out this Friday. I'm going to see it Thursday with an advanced showing, so suck on it! That's right. Okay, so I thought before that the least I could do is review Iron Man 1. I might be able to review Iron Man 2 in the next day before I see Iron Man 3. But certainly, Iron Man 1 is an instant superhero classic. It's got all the makings that make it last from the day of its release to a decade after its release. It's really cool the way they do that. So I guess personal experience, not a whole lot. I was 12, 13 years old when this movie came out, so I was pretty pumped through the whole thing. I was laughing and I was enjoying myself. The action scenes were really cool. And they seem really, really tame compared to the stuff you see in the Avengers and all the in the few clips and trailers I've seen for Iron Man 3. The action just keeps getting more intense each time, as it should, because it's trying to be bigger and better and more impressive than the last. Sometimes it doesn't happen as far as story goes, because the story of Iron Man at least has everything you need to make this a great classic. I remember the only reason I saw it in the theater was because its reviews were better than Speed Racer, which happened to be out about the same time. That sounds so horrible, but to a 12-year-old, that's what I was looking at. I said, well, Speed Racer might be cool, and then I looked at the reviews, I said, oh, okay. I looked at the reviews, Iron Man's reviews had been good, I heard it made a lot of money, so I said, okay, there's something to this. And boom, Iron Man was a huge, huge smash, and I loved every second of it. Okay, let's see, the movie starts with actually Back in Black by AC/DC, and you can't start a movie with anything better than that. That is freaking awesome. And of course, the first two Iron Man movies, and even a spot in the Avengers, had AC/DC on their soundtrack, which is incredible. And I commend director Jon Favreau, or Joss Whedon in the case of the Avengers, for including that. Don't know about Iron Man 3, but I sure expect some AC/DC in there, and it would be really, really cool. And it would be a bad thing to break that tradition, so Shane Black, don't let me down in that field. Otherwise, your film looks great. Let's see, and then Stark's kind of, this whole introduction is basically all about Stark in 3-4 minutes of screen time, including a little bit of the attack of his caravan. It's all a basic introduction to him without anybody pretty much having to say his name. We figure out, oh, this guy's, this billionaire playboy philanthropist, as Joss Whedon puts it in the dialogue of the Avengers, that was one of the sweeter lines of that movie. But it had a lot of sweet lines. And I'm not going to review the Avengers, by the way, before this. But anyways, let's see here. I guess the one thing I have to say about this is Back in Black kind of is like Tony Stark in a little way. It's that brass, cool sound that I don't give a hoot and holler what you think. I'm this cool dude, and I love that. And Back in Black, it doesn't necessarily say that, but Back in Black is still the way it sounds. Some people get that interpretation, and in this case, you can interpret it that way. That's kind of cool. And then there's this like I said, you have 3-4 minutes of him and soldiers bantering around, and that's really, really funny. And then, there's the caravan attack, and it's kind of weird how he just stands there as his own missiles. I mean, he had plenty of time to run away from the thing, but instead, no, he'd rather stand there and be like, whoa! It's kind of a little overdone, but I don't know. It could have been a little faster and more intense in that case, quote George Lucas. But, anyway, so then this is really cool, and I think some movies have adopted this now. The idea of, okay, let's set up, this thing, start it off with a little bit of an action scene, then we'll say, okay, what led up to this? Because it's kind of a sudden place to start, this attack on a caravan. Where are we? Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, somewhere around there. We don't know, or it says, but I don't know. I just can't remember off the top of my head. I'll probably remember about halfway through this review and get back to you on that. But if not, it's somewhere over there. And and there's this whole introduction. There's this award ceremony going on, and we're introduced to a couple of characters, James Rhodes and Obadiah Stane, and of course we find out more about them later. But certainly, there's that stuff with the montage before the roadie gives the award away. And it's really a strong an interesting structural process here. Let's set up this character. We got the basic idea of this guy's rich, this guy's, he's a playboy of the world, and then he gets attacked, and now he's being held captive. How did he get here? Okay, let's explain through montage. Kind of the same way that Up did a year later. But of course they wrote that screenplay years before, I think years before Iron Man was greenlit. But Up is kind of another way, except that's more narrative montage versus like slideshow montage in this case. But you get the whole idea of his father was died and and he was all set up to be this the junior, the kid. They even say in one of the articles it's chip off the old block, or whatever, and that's kind of a thing where you like, oh, okay, that's what, okay, so he kind of had a dark child. Oh, it looks like he graduated at age of 17, MIT, or whatever. And then his father died, and then he came back, and now he's running Stark Enterprises. And it's kind of that cool structure that, I'm trying to think of another example of this, but none's coming to mind. But I've seen a movie or two do it. Maybe a bad one that I can't necessarily remember. That's why. But yeah. And then Stane goes up there, accepts the award on Tony's behalf, and he says, the worst thing about Tony is also the best thing, or the other way around, whatever the line is. He says he's always working. And of course we see cut to Stark playing the casinos all across Vegas. What else would he be doing? And we briefly see in the background director Jon Favreau playing a character that we'll see much more of in the sequel. Probably more than I ever wanted to. And that character is named Happy Hogan. It's weird, I have to say. Just the whole idea of, okay, in the first movie, let's make it a funny camp. I was actually, I knew about it beforehand, somehow. Probably saw an interview and they were talking, and it said director / Happy Hogan or something. I thought, what's that? And then he pointed out like something like, I'm in a couple of scenes, I'm here in the background. Almost like a show off a little bit, but maybe that was just the character he was playing in that interview, whatever. But I thought, I was laughing with it because I said, oh, that's kind of neat, oh, that's the director, it's a joke, I get it. The second movie, it wasn't a joke anymore. Okay, but that's another review for another day. I'll get to Iron Man 2 eventually, whether it's this week or with Thor, The Dark World coming out later, we'll see. Let's see. And then there's Rhodey and Stark. They kind of get a little banter here and there, and then later on we get stuff with them. But yeah, and their kind of relationship is kind of set up. They're the friends, but at the same time, they tolerate each other, and they're the way they disagree with stuff. Like Stark is a playboy of the world, and Rhodey is of course he's involved in the army. So if he was a playboy of the world, he'd lose his job. And then Tony gets inducted kind of into a mini interview because the reporter is hot and or cute. I can't remember this movie. I'm so glad I watched it again just to get this review done. But the one of the guards says she's cute, she's okay, and it's kind of funny. And he ends up sleeping with her that night, and he kind of says some classical dialogue in there in the thing, but before the sex scene or whatever, that's very brief. And then we're introduced to the Malibu house, which from the trailers of Iron Man 3 is going to be much more important to the story. And we're also introduced to Pepper Potts, who's the secretary to Tony, and she's also kind of a handy-dandy assistant sometimes, played by Gwyneth Paltrow. And I didn't mention Robert Downey Jr. yet. Holy crap! I'll brief him in the end. Just kind of shout my praises of Hallelujah. But yeah, and Gwyneth Paltrow plays this really well, and I think she enjoys this role, and she looks like she's gonna have a blast in Iron Man 3, and she was one of the, her and Tony's part in the Avengers was actually one of the better parts of that movie, or at least the setup to, let's get all the 4 major superheroes on the same screen together, it's still awesome to see that, even a year later. But yeah, and then we get back to the cave. We figure out, okay, this is what happened. He was over there for a weapons demonstration. And then he got attacked by the terrorists who were evidently watching it, and they have pictures of the Jericho missile, which is what Stark is promoting. And now it looks like Stark is going to be constructing this missile in order to save his own life. And we're introduced to a man named Yinsen, who kind of turns into his, his assistant in building not the missile, but the future Mark I. But we get to that in a little while. And we see the first arc reactor, which was you could call it arc reactor, but he says it's only a magnet that's keeping the shrapnel out of your heart. And it's kind of funny. They make a Walking Dead reference before Walking Dead was even greenlit as a TV show. That's kind of cool. And then we're introduced briefly after that to Raza, who's the, if you don't remember, who's this guy you're talking about now? Freaky Jason guy. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about, the guy who also played the captain in the first scene in Star Trek, and then he got killed. Remember that? Yeah, that's the same actor. But yeah, this guy's basically the leader of the people in the cave, in case you can't remember. And of course, the movie kind of gives him a couple of scenes, and then he's done. But yeah, I think he kind of makes the most of it. He gets a little bit of dialogue that's slightly cheesy, slightly I'm the villain, hear me roar kind of guy. But at the same time, it's actually at times just a little bit threatening the way he presents it. So that's kind of cool. You get that secondary villain in there before the middle of the film starts.